We're going to dive in the second inspirational dialogue. We've got some amazing guests lined up to discuss with us the role of libraries, the changing role of libraries, as we are battling against challenges like mental health and the climate crisis. Because within these challenges, also libraries again are coming up to the forefront in unexpected ways and really stepping up their game. And so the question is, what can they do, libraries, to fight these bigger challenges that we are facing in Europe and the world? And maybe the bigger question behind all this is, if books and libraries have the power to make us believe in dragons and fairies, can they also help us imagine a different world where the climate crisis has been resolved, where people are not in social isolation anymore? That is hopefully the bigger question that we are going to tackle today with three amazing guests coming from civil society, libraries, and the creative sector. So the first one I'd like to introduce to you is a climate activist, best-selling author of It's Not That Radical, Climate Action to Transform Our World. And she's recognized as one of the most influential women of the UK climate justice movement. And Prospect magazine has even mentioned her as the world's top thinkers in 2024. Please join me in welcoming Michaela Loach. Next up is a cultural engagement consultant based in Athens, Greece, specializing in inclusive collaborative practices and creative placemaking. She's done a ton of inspiring projects, amongst others, libraries on prescription. So really excited to hear more about this. She's also a mentor of this year's Europe Challenge. Please make some noise for Dina Ntsiora. And last, from the UK as well, from Oldham Heritage, she's a senior development officer there, looking after information services and adult health and well-being. And she has led projects bridging climate action with mental health, particularly with South Asian communities, and participates in this year's Europe Challenge. Most of you will know her. Please join me in welcoming Vicky Varley. Thank you all for being here, and as the previous panel, we're going to start with a short video of one of the libraries also here present today. Stockport, are you here today? Make some noise for Stockport. So we're going to have a look at what Stockport Library is doing to address these challenges there.
Places like this, like Stockport, very close to Manchester in the UK, are where the Industrial Revolution first started. But while the Industrial Revolution brought us many good things, some people believe that it has also disconnected us from nature. Rob has lived in this area his whole life, and after struggling with mental health issues, he found that going back to nature and leading a more sustainable life helped him with his own personal and healing journey.
So I kind of didn't choose to be in this situation. I didn't think I'd end up like this, with mental health problems, unable to be employed on a permanent basis. But now that I am in the situation, and I found myself wanting to use my time to do things to help British people to reconnect with the land and the nature. I mean, I'm trying to get myself involved in lots of different things. You know, everything from the physical activity, the mental health respite, the fresh air, the exercise, learning skills that too many British people have forgotten.
The local library has been key in bringing communities together and raising awareness on sustainable living. Today, Rob is joining one of their Dig It days, organised at the library.
Stockport Libraries decided to see if we could put gardens in any of the libraries, because quite a few of our libraries have outdoor space. So today we're doing a seed and plant swap activity day, what we call a Dig It day, where we're doing work outside at the same time. This table is plants where people can donate to the garden. Then this table here is plants that are for people to take away.
I live locally, probably about 500 meters walk away. So it's lovely to just be working on a project so close to home. Local libraries are a really useful service for the community, but they're so much more. People from all walks of life use the library for different purposes. So it's really great that right out the front of the library, as people come in, they will see a really nice community-created garden.
My name's Valerie Foraker. I live in Edgeley, which is the other side of Stockport. And I'm here helping with the Bredbury Library people to do some more weeding. It's nice because it's a community. People are getting together. Behind me, you see different age groups, people helping, and I think it's really important.
But you said you live in Edgeley.
Edgeley, yeah.
Have you met Rob? Rob, Valerie lives in Edgeley.
You do? Right.
And Rob is involved in a lot of community activities.
What? I'm a Grow Edgeley person and a friend of Alexandra Park.
At events like this, people are not just reconnecting to the soil and the land, they are also bonding and building social relationships within their community.
Well, he was full of ladybird larvae.
And what are you doing with them?
Saving them so they don't get binned. Today was great. All the people are fantastic. People that are interested in the same things I am, involved in the same things that I'm involved with, and just building up relationships with them, and learning things from them. And someone said they learned something from me today, so that was pretty good.
Does it make you feel good?
Oh yeah, of course it does, yeah.
Great seeing this. I'll start. You're of course both from the UK. Dina, looking at this video, really bridging also those two bigger issues, right? And probably even more issues, but mental well-being and fighting the climate crisis. How do those bigger topics also relate to you?
So, first of all, before I start, I'll quickly plug a big thank you for having us here, and a huge congratulations to the libraries who were with us at the marketplace earlier. Incredible work, everybody. So, we did the Europe Challenge last year, and we worked with Athens Comics Library, a comics library based in Athens, what it says on the tin. And we worked closely with the refugee and migrant community in Athens, who at the time they were facing a number of mental health challenges. Together with the refugee and migrant community, there was a large number of people from Greece who have been displaced due to climate change and big natural disasters that have been happening in Greece in the last couple of years, like the big wildfires that you all know. So I think that brought people together, thinking that losing your home can happen at any moment, and this is it's not where you're born or where you are, but it can be a specific time of your life. And as we say as well, being a refugee or migrant is a particular period of your life, and it's not your identity. You're a lot of other things around that. So with the library, we try to create spaces where we can celebrate stories. We really believe that we are stories, and we listen to stories from other people every day. And this is what really connects us and can give us our own personal understanding about the world. So depending on what stories you hear, you have a different understanding about the world around you.
And I see also that, so you brought different communities together, trying to boost also their maybe social relationships, especially if they're not born and raised in Athens in this sense. Also, could you tell us a little bit more about this libraries on prescription, right? It sounds like proper medicine in a way. How is this being done?
Great. So that was a project we applied for the Europe Challenge last year. So libraries and prescription. We worked together with local libraries in Athens and across Greece, actually, and mental health and PSS workers, mental health professionals, so psychiatrists and psychologists, who we set up a scheme where they could subscribe not instead of medication or counseling, but as well as medication and counseling, some visits to the local library. So at no point we didn't say that medication is not necessary, depending on the condition, or counseling, which is very important, of course. But we also thought that a lot of it is based on isolation, so giving the opportunity for people to come together in places that are trusted, like libraries, is very, very important.
Yeah.
And we ran that as a pilot scheme, and in a way, in Greece, we did almost like a mini version of the Europe Challenge, but in Greece, because we thought that we cannot just pilot with our own library. Let's do a call out, and we invited other 4 local libraries across Greece to work with us on that. But the special thing was that we don't believe that one solution fits all. We believe that every library has to discuss with the local community and come up with an activity that it works for them. So for us in Athens Comics Library, we work with people facing depression. And what they wanted to do was to set up stand-up comedy classes, which took place in the library. So we got together, and we were teaching them stand-up comedy skills, and throughout that they were discussing about their personal circumstances as well. The second library was a library based inside a prison. And what the community asked to do was to do visual visits in museums, because that would never have the opportunity to go into a museum space. So we raised money, we got them a big plasma TV, and they were meeting at the library once a week, discussing about the mental health, but also visiting various museums online. The other library was in a university, and we worked with a suicide prevention team, because there were high rates within the student community, and we ran a program on creative writing. And the last one was working with the library in a tiny, tiny remote village in the north of Greece, working with the local women who were born in a very patriarchal society, where they were born to be carers. So the moment they're born, they're helping the mother in the house, and they look after their children, then the grandchildren, then their husband. So all they knew what to do was to care for someone, but no one ever cared for them. So together with the local library, we discussed with them what would care look for them. And what they came up was they would love to do walks in the local forest and collect herbs that they knew about, because they would cook food or make hand creams or face creams. So we did a herbs diary. So the women group would walk around, collect the herbs, and go back in the library and study. So the important thing was that each community wanted a different solution to bring to come together, and we facilitated that.
Yeah, and you worked with different groups and different social activities. Yeah, please, of course. And I'm still curious to know, because on the first outlook, you would think, okay, mental well-being and the climate crisis are 2 distinct issues. Vicky, you work with South Asian people of South Asian descent in the UK. How are those 2 issues linked for you in working in the library?
I think in quite a few ways. I'm thinking particularly about a community that we work with in an area called Coldest in Oldham, which is one of the most economically deprived areas in the country. People there, families there, have anxiety about climate issues, but they might not come into the library and tell you that. So climate issues are causing them anxiety, it's affecting their well-being, but they don't necessarily understand what's going on. So what we found that was people were coming in, they were worried about their families back in Bangladesh, who were already feeling the effects of climate change. They were anxious about how they were going to put food on the table, because food prices were rising as a result of climate change. They were worried about putting the heating on in winter and so on, but they weren't necessarily thinking, I'm worried about climate change. They were worried about those immediate effects. And in fact, I don't know if there's any Bangla speakers in the room who will correct me here, but a lot of the women said, well, we don't even have a word for that. We don't have a word for climate change. So we decided to get some people in, to get some facilitators in to talk about climate change and what's going on in the world, and also to try and give those women some agency over what's happening and show them how they can interact with local leaders and decision makers on climate issues, which was fantastic to do.
Yeah, and Michaela, I actually checked whether her book is available here at the OBA, and it is. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's nice.
Yeah, so that's really cool. You can check it out here in the library. I don't know which section by heart, but we can check it out later. You've written an amazing bestseller about climate action, about the climate justice movement. And I was also wondering, from your perspective, how does mental well-being come in? Could it also, I heard Greta Thunberg saying, maybe a colleague of yours, we could say, saying one time, I started off from eco-anxiety and then transformed my anxiety into some sort of an activism or a constructive way of looking at the climate crisis by doing something. Is that also to you how they are linked, or do you have a different approach?
Also, it makes me so excited when I see it in a library. I think more so than anything, I'm like, wow. And it's coming out in Dutch later this year, so it'll be more accessible for people, which is nice. Yay! Oh, thanks for the few claps. Sorry. I really appreciate the determination of whoever it was that was keeping that going. I think I can relate to that situation in many ways. I think I was worried about the climate crisis without realising that it was the climate crisis in a similar way than a lot of the communities you're talking about for a really long time. I was born in Jamaica, but moved to the UK when I was around 2.5 years old, because of wanting like a safer life in different ways. Like a lot of people choose to move for lots of different reasons. And I would have these worries about like my family's ability to live back home, but I don't think I would have seen that as related to the climate crisis, because the way I think that the climate crisis is talked about often in the media is this, like, especially in Europe, is this kind of future apocalyptic crisis that will happen one day, like this kind of disaster movie. And I think, and also that it's often talked about as the fear is when this reaches like Europe, is that sort of the worst thing that could happen, when actually the climate crisis has been happening for a really long time to a lot of countries across the world, and has been impacting people for a very long time, but in ways that maybe would not have been communicated in the same way. But I think we're starting to. But I remember when I first started to kind of feel this like fear of this D-Day apocalypse in the future, maybe similarly to Greta, I would like be unable to sleep at night because I was so worried and I didn't know what to do with it. And I think that a lot of that kind of version of eco-anxiety that we talk about, it comes from this place of feeling like we don't have agency, or we can't do anything about this. But for me, in my experience, was that when I recognised that actually the climate crisis is inherently connected to all the other issues that I care about, and it's also connected to like people's like material conditions and ability to live, that actually there's a lot that we can do, because whilst this is different than other issues, it's not the first time that any community has faced an existential threat. There are so many communities across the world. My ancestors in Jamaica who were enslaved, they faced an existential threat to their existence every day. Indigenous communities across the world face existential threats to their existence every day at the face of like mega mining corporations or logging corporations. And so I think that if I know that communities have resisted existential threats in the past and in the present and haven't given up and have actually created so much change, then so can we. And so we're not doing something that hasn't been done before. And I find that like, and realising that I have a role in that and that I don't have to just sit and watch things happen, we can do something about it, really helped me to move from this feeling of this like kind of existential panic into like practical action and what we can actually do about it.
On a more personal level, you're a young author, best-selling author about the climate crisis. I was wondering, what was your relationship to libraries in general when growing up? How did it maybe shape you also as a person in terms of getting books or gaining the knowledge that you've now also made your own and are shaping the world with it? I
remember that when I was bullied really badly when I was a kid, and I didn't have that many friends because I grew up in a very white area, and I'm sure it had something to do with the fact that I was the only black kid in every school that I was in. And And so books became like my best pals. And I remember my local library had like a reading challenge. I can't remember how young I was. I must have been quite young. And part of the challenge was that you had to read like a different genre every week for the summer. And then we probably got like a pack of stickers or something as a congratulations for doing it. But I also was quite competitive, so I think this competitive nature helped me get through it. And I think it was through that I discovered like dystopian books, which really I realise now have really formed my politics. I think a lot of my politics was formed by the Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games.
I think it helped me to understand like capitalism and imperialism, because it was this book about like the consolidation of wealth being like held in one area, and all of the districts producing that wealth but not getting to their fair share of it, and then about people rising up, and also a lot of their uprisings were like kind of taking control of the means of production. So I think it's a very radical book that maybe doesn't get understood in the same way when it's been made into a Hollywood movie. But it was through that kind of library challenge that I think I was exposed to different genres that then not only formed my politics but also made me obsessed with reading, and therefore now at a point where, I've written this book. I've written another one that I'll be announcing soon, which is very exciting. But
your second book is coming out soon.
Yeah, well, next, I'm not meant to say, or I can say it, but next week I'll be announcing that I've got a kids book coming out, which is very exciting for 8 to 12-year-olds, and it'll be out in March of next year. But I mean, I was a very like sciencey person at school, but it was reading in my free time that I think, and writing in my free time. And I would attribute a lot of that to libraries being a space that, we were talking before this of how being even here feels like a warm hug. And I think that libraries do feel like that for a lot of people, and especially for young kids that maybe are having a difficult time elsewhere.
Yeah, and that's so. I kicked off with this little introduction of if dragons can, if we can make, if books can make us believe in dragons, could we imagine also a climate neutral world? And it sounds like for you, it has played that important role. To you, Dina, how? What role is a library nowadays playing? We know from the first panel that it's already changing from this repository of books into a community center, a democratic space. How do you also see the role of libraries in relation to the climate crisis and a place for people to come together?
I find I see climate change, the climate justice issues as I just think we should be honest that they're actually social justice matters, because climate change affects people in a very different way, and that is not about how many trees are near the area you live, but about the general social justice system. That's why I find that libraries could be spaces of equity, because they're quite friendly and they're simple spaces, and they exist everywhere. At least in Greece, even if you go to a small village, there is a library, even if it has like 5 books. But maybe a museum or a gallery could be a little bit more scary for people of a different education or background to access. So I think there is a level of equity in libraries where everyone inside the library can feel equal, because you can really kind of showcase your different background as much. I think that libraries should really maintain that active listening with their community, and actually, because we don't have a lot to lose, because we don't have a lot, there isn't major funding going to libraries, there isn't major publicity going to libraries, so in a way that could actually be a positive thing, because that could allow us more space for failure, for trial and error, let's say. So I would definitely believe that libraries should be actively listening the community and try out different things, be brave, try it for 6 months, see how it goes. If it fails, what they say in England, is it a retreat and repeat? So try something different. So I think libraries have that flexibility to change their programming, change their spaces, adapt the book collections they have. And also talking about books, you said the book that kind of helps you kind of shape the way you think. There's this beautiful book called The Care Manifesto. It's from the Care Collective from the UK. And it talks about the interconnection of people and care, and how we care for each other is how we care about our homes, whether that's our country or the building or our neighborhood or our global home, planet Earth. And I think libraries can really kind of encourage that interconnectedness between people, and this kind of like shared care towards putting programs together, towards improving your mental health. And once you improve your mental health, you can start actively thinking about how you can improve your physical environment as well.
And Vicky, what were some of the impacts that you saw working with these diverse communities that you work with in and outside the library? Did you see people change? How did they come in? How did they get out?
Yeah, we see it a lot with everyone that comes into the library, that it can change how you feel when you go somewhere where you're welcomed, where you're not judged, where you're in a neutral, safe space. You've just made me think about some of the asylum seekers that we work with. In the UK, if you're an asylum seeker, you're probably going to get dumped in a hotel, somewhere that's not very nice, in an area that's not particularly connected to amenities. And what we found, that the hotel that happened to in Oldham was fairly near to one of our libraries. So I visited that hotel, spoke to a lot of the men, and they were very closed down. Obviously, they've been through a lot. They were very wary. I invited them to come to the library the following week, and about 50 of them turned up, which was amazing. But meeting them in the library, in what is more of a level playing field, it was a neutral, open space. It was like meeting different people. We were able to show them how we could help them and support them, and you immediately felt that their mental health and well-being, although it was very much at risk, it didn't feel as bad as it did when we met them in the hotel, when they were in a space where, their behaviour was being monitored and they felt quite trapped. So, yeah, libraries just change the way, I think they just literally can change the way that you feel when you spend time in them.
And looking at the maybe also future role, there's of course a room full of colleagues from all over Europe. What are some of the lessons learned you could convey to other people interested in this? And then maybe also related, what could libraries do more in the fight against mental health issues or climate change?
Well, we do things very similar to what Dina's mentioned. We have books on prescription in the UK, so you're able to borrow a book that you might be prescribed by your doctor, which is amazing. I think what we've done in Oldham that's worked really well is we have included health and wellbeing is central to our library strategy. So we actually have a team who work on health and wellbeing. It's not something that's tagged on, it's something that's very central to what we do. So
you've really integrated it into your structures, and that's really...
Yeah, so we have staff that are dedicated to looking after mental health and wellbeing, which has been great. And I just think we have to forge partnerships. That's really important with people who can help us to deliver our health and wellbeing agenda. There's not a lot of money going around, so building really strong partnerships with people who are able to help us to deliver is going to be more and more important going forward. And another thing that I was this morning, we were talking about social inclusion and how the social networks and how digital has taken that away. I think digital is actually really important here, because more and more health and the delivery of health is online. So in the UK, if you want to access NHS services, you really need to be digitally included. So libraries can have a really central role in helping people to become digitally included and then able to access healthcare.
Now, I was wondering, Michaela, as an important figure in the climate justice movement in the UK and around, what's your relation to libraries now in the movement? We know now it has an important role for democracy, for getting people together, exchanging views, for dialogue. So I was also thinking, is there also a role for boosting social movements or getting people together? Is there a link between you and climate movements in relation to libraries?
I definitely think so, and also just the fact that I know that you've both mentioned this, there aren't that many places that people can even just go and be anymore. That you don't have to spend money, and you can just go and connect with other people. Maybe people also that you wouldn't normally connect with in other spaces. But in a lot of the groups that I'm in, one thing that we're often looking for is like, where can we have a meeting, or like where can we actually meet up together that we don't have to pay for, and that that can be a way that libraries can be used as like spaces for people to gather together. But as you both have talked about, like places for people to be able to have some sort of comfort, I think is really, really important. And I just love so much this, like the fact that people are prescribing books and that health is becoming so much more expansive than just that medication. Because I went to medical school. I decided not to be a doctor anymore, but that's a whole other story. But maybe
you can prescribe books. You are prescribing books, I think.
I prescribe my books to everyone. Yeah, that's the medicine I do now. But no, in choosing to leave medicine, it wasn't leaving health work. It was more so that, and I think this is something that you guys really understand, and that the challenge really seems to understand in this perspective of how we talk about climate and mental health, is that often in like traditional Western medicine, when we treat someone once they come to us with an illness, and we'll give them medication or maybe like a treatment plan, but we often don't look at what's caused that illness in the first place. And so I see it as kind of like a river. It's like this stream analogy that gets used a lot in social determinants of health, of how further down the stream, there's like a village of people and they're getting really sick, like they're vomiting a lot. And the doctor in the village is like, okay, I'm going to give you some medication that will stop you from vomiting. And it stops that person from dying in that moment. So it is really important. And it's a life-saving role. But what people could do is go further up the stream and see that someone's been putting like poo in the stream. And when I do this at schools, kids love it because they're like, poo, ha ha ha. But what could be better is maybe like working out how to stop that poo from getting in the stream in the first place and contaminating the water. And that's where I think I see my role as now. As before, I was going to be the doctor further down the stream. Whereas now I see it as how can we stop the things that are making people unwell in the first place? How can we tackle these systems of capitalism, of white supremacy, that are meaning that people become unwell? And again, when I do this at schools and talk about this at schools, one kid put their hand up in this classroom and was like, but miss, doesn't that mean that you get poo thrown on you? And I was like, yeah sometimes, yeah. But so doing that further up the stream work can sometimes be a bit less like flashy and exciting. And sometimes you do get poo thrown on you, but it is the work, I think, that will mean that we don't get people sick in the first place. And part of that is thinking, how do we use our spaces to make our communities well? Part of that is, how do we not just wait until people are at the crisis position, and how do we create a society, a culture of wellness, and I think that what you guys are doing is a really huge part of that. So yeah, big up yourselves.
Yeah, big up for yourselves indeed. I'd like to open up the floor for some questions. I'm going to look at my partner, Luando. How much time we got left?
I told you that I'm bad at timekeeping.
I would say about 5 minutes, maybe a bit more. There in a minute.
I'm sorry, Dylan.
No worries.
If you could just yeah.
I feel like I'm back at uni. I remember we had these at university.
Is this a microphone? Oh, okay. Thank you, everyone. So I'm here from IFLA, where I run IFLA's climate policy. And we're trying to bring librarians into the UN processes, to the COPs, to the UNFCCC, to be talking about this work. And when we're in a librarian space, we have all these great ideas, but I find so often people working in development outside of our sector have no idea what we're doing. So my question is, do you have any, take or reflection on how we're reaching out beyond our sector to valorize this work and to be seen as partners in greater development strategy?
I'd like to start. Dina?
Just a thought on that. I think that libraries should slowly start moving their work outside the four walls. So the more they're present in other areas, the better. So it could be like a pop-up project somewhere else, or they could be attending conference, or even see within the staff and structure what skills are necessary for the team to be able to educate themselves on climate change, even like the terminology and the lingo, which could be complicated and intimidating at times, or, write an academic paper, or actually start getting out there to actually represent ideas and the local community in other areas like COP COP29 is coming up soon. It would be great if there was a library-led project presented there, and it's a great idea as well, or we will have young people supported by a library presenting some work there as well. Particularly, we are going to start working for a project for COP30, which is going to be in Brazil.
So the climate conference.
Yes, okay, correct, sorry. The climate conference, focusing on wildfires, which has been a huge issue in Greece and also in Brazil as well. So we're going to try through the library to find a project led by young people. We're going to design it together to kind of tell that story and how that affects climate displacement within the communities. And we hope to be presenting it there and then. But yeah, again, this is about libraries getting out of their four walls, and I think it's very important to do so.
And I think how to have climate conversations with people who maybe wouldn't see their role or their part as being climate related is also to meet people where they're at. I think sometimes when we care about this issue, we'll go and be like, you have to care about it in the exact same way that I do and understand it in the same way that I do. But the fact that the climate crisis is inherently connected to everything means that we'll be able to find another way in with people that they already care about. I don't know, for example, there's an organisation called Water Bear that make climate documentaries, and I can't remember all the Fs, but they have all the Fs they're trying to reach, and one of them is football, because most people care about football, and they trying to make films that will reach people who care about football, but connects them to the climate crisis. Or another F is fashion, so make things about fashion to reach people who already care about fashion, to link them in. And so I think there are other ways that we can kind of Trojan horse it in, rather than having to be clearly this is climate and sustainability. We can be this is an issue I know you already care about. Now, let's connect it. I think that can be useful.
And that's something that maybe relates to also what you were saying, that sometimes might mean that you would even have to go out of the library to find or address certain target groups that you want to address. Is that something that you're already doing, Vicky? Go out of the library more often? Something that you would like to do?
We would like to, yeah. I mean, we do go out and work in the community. We absolutely do, like I mentioned, going up to the hotel to meet the asylum seekers, going out into the community and talking to community groups. But I think on a bigger scale, we need to get better at advocacy in libraries. We say it a lot, but I think one of my favourite things about taking part in the Europe Challenge has been learning about advocacy and pitching and talking up what we do, because I think most libraries are doing amazing things around climate, and we just need to get better at expressing that.
Yeah, as the director of ECF said this morning, there's great potential for the libraries becoming not just a social network, but now you even hear saying maybe an advocacy network or a lobbying group.
Yes.
Who knows?
Like it. Yeah.
Any other questions? All good so far. So let's continue on that. You're yourself, Dean, a cultural practitioner as well. I think you're experienced with working with different groups, with advocacy also a little bit. What could be the potential for libraries to start having a louder voice, or accommodating, facilitating for a louder voice in these topics?
Regarding advocacy, I have to say, when we did the Europe Challenge, we felt like it went really well, but it wasn't enough the time for us to have. We worked in partnership with a psychiatric organization to do the scientific research on the results on mental health, because obviously we were not qualified and we wanted to create some indicators, so we actually have data. So we ran the project for 6 months, but we felt like in 6 months you could get a feeling and some data on the improvement on mental health, but we needed more time to have more robust data that we can go and submit somewhere for more funding. So when it comes to advocacy, I have to say our main purpose was mainly to try to find more funding to gain that extra 6 months, because it was just going so well. We just needed that little bit of extra for more robust data. And we pretty much wrote to everyone. I think the project is more popular across Europe than actually in Greece, because it was a year where the Ministry of Culture launched Arts on Prescription, social prescribing of culture. But they did the typical mistake. I hope no one from the Greek government is here, but anyway, we told them already. And anyway, they didn't give us funding, so I can say it anyway. But what they did is they opened up the social prescribing program for museums only. And this is the biggest mistake straight away, because it shows exactly that only museums or archaeological spaces with the Parthenon and Acropolis are valid as cultural spaces in Greece. And this is a place where I'm telling you, non-Greek people will go anyway, because we've seen all of that all our lives at school. No refugee communities will go because they're a ticket and it's not particularly friendly, whatever. But everyone will go to the library, and we were advocating so much to ask them to open up this program to more spaces, to at least allow us to put an application in, and then they could see it. So then you have a lot of the biggest museums doing effectively tour of the galleries of the museums to people from mental health organizations. So again, it's a very top-down activity. It's not coming from the community. So I'm saying that because we tried very much, but I guess in the meantime, we wrote articles around it. We sent it as a research paper, because my colleague is, she's a doctor as well. So we tried to write academic papers around it. So that goes back to advocacy that, yes, even funding, looking for funding could be
something you could collaborate.
Yeah, you could collaborate, but I feel also it's a shame to let good projects die out because of that, because we're so close. And also, we've also created a toolkit, which is available on the European challenge, which at least we think that if other libraries want to kickstart it on a local level, they could do it, or we can support them online to do it. And very sorry, I know I'm taking so much time. The other advocacy thing is that we start small with talking to the municipality. The municipality was really engaged with those ideas, because especially in the smaller cities, not so much in Athens because there's so much going on, but in smaller cities, the municipality and the local authorities were the ones who were willing to support that. So start with the people you know.
And just to close off, I'd like to hear from you all three, as we're talking about climate crisis and mental health, are also maybe the two topics that especially young people, I think, are most concerned about of maybe all age groups. Then for a long time, I think libraries weren't seen as the most sexy places for young people to go. We know that reading in general has been declining, on books at least. Vicky, you already said that libraries also have the important role of offering services to increase digital literacy and maybe also offer different services to still attract young people to come to libraries. So what's the vision, let's say, for your library and for you three, how to get young people to engage with libraries in the 21st century?
That's a very big question.
I'm so sorry.
Oh my goodness. If I knew the answer to that. I don't really know. I think books have become a bit sexy again in the UK. We have seen a bit of a resurgence.
With book talk and things like that, I think that's helped.
Although that's not necessarily translating into book loans in libraries. So again, like you said, finding people where they are. So let's all get on TikTok.
Yeah, so
and that's terrible advice.
For people in the room who don't know what's book talk, so it's discussing books on TikTok. But the question is, indeed, does it get people to come to libraries?
I think a lot of young people forget libraries exist. I sometimes have forgotten. Like once I left uni, I hadn't actually signed up for my local library and for like over a year after. And then when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like 10 minutes walk from where I live. It's amazing. It's also a space that I can use as like a co-working space so that I don't have to pay loads of money for a fancy space, and also get to know people in my community better, and also my local library, lots of events were going on, and I just didn't realise, and I think maybe part of that is just talking about it more so people know.
So what would you advise as part of the young generation to people working with or in libraries to get out there and get those young people in?
I don't know. I do actually think using social media is actually really useful. For example, I feel like a lot of libraries could do that trend at the moment that's like, my Gen Z marketing manager writes my script for me, and when they have like an older person go around and basically just say slay at everything, I think that would work really well. Because for me, what actually reminded me was that I saw a TikTok from a library and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I should go to my local library. I just didn't think about that then. And then I think that sometimes just reminding people like these spaces are here, like also that using them keeps them going. So like, even though you're not maybe having to pay to use it, just the fact that libraries are being used is useful for them to be able to continue. I think letting people know there's a reason for them to use it as well. But I do think that young people want to read. I think that people are just really exhausted because I think sometimes we talk about it as if, no one's reading anymore. But I can't remember the exact statistic, but the amount that we've read by like midday today because of our phones and emails and social media and the news is like more than we would have read in many weeks, I think, if not maybe a whole year, in like many decades ago. Very, very accurate statistic that I gave you there. Yeah, you can quote me on that.
Source TikTok, yeah.
But I think that a lot of people are quite exhausted. I feel exhausted sometimes by like halfway through the day because I've consumed so much information. So I think reminding people also of like the value in reading a book and being less pretentious about it, I think can be useful. Like I deliberately wrote my book to, the vibe is, what I hope it is and what people have said it is that you're sat with a friend and you're just having a chat and it's not someone who's telling you what you should think or trying to seem really smart and like you're not gonna have to Google every fifth word. But instead you feel like you're just getting to know someone, and that's what I think is the value of nonfiction from my perspective, is that you spend so much time with someone when you're reading a nonfiction book, or even a fiction book, but it's a fictional person, and that transforms you a lot more than like watching like a 10-15 second video on the internet, or like forming a parasocial relationship with someone that you don't actually know online. And so I think there is so much value in books, but I think reminding people of what that is, and doing it in a way that's not like you have to do this to have like achieved something. It's more that this can be something that's enjoyable. Those are some things I think I found useful, because a lot of people who've read my book, it was the only book they read in that year, and they're not someone who normally reads maybe, and that was for me like a success, because I was like, that means it's going outside of the bubble of people who maybe are already exposed with these ideas and already care about these things. So I think accessibility, getting rid of protectionism, using social media, just do the trends. I know that it feels cringe, but like you have to just go with the cringe. That's the biggest thing with social media, it's going to feel cringe, just get over it. And that might be useful.
Cheers. Well, I think on that note, I'd really like to thank my guests and also you for the questions that you've been having, discussing these bigger topics. I know they're big questions, but I think we can all feel there's so much happening both in the Europe Challenge and libraries all around to address these topics. So thank you so much for now. So, Luando, what is up next?
Just want to do a bit of a summary of what we've been doing. This is a summit. The point of a summit is I hope you're enjoying the view. The view in terms of, listening and engaging the speakers, and also the marketplace, and the literal view when you go to the quiet room. Who's been to the quiet room? Beautiful views there. We started early this morning with this broad idea of democracy. A big feature of democracy is human rights. And human rights are all interconnected. It's a constellation. There's no one right that's more important than the other. And the whole point of strengthening democracies is strengthening human rights. And when democracies are not strong, you get, compromised environments and mental health. The whole point of strengthening a library is we hope to strengthen democracy, and if we strengthen democracy, we hope to strengthen, our environmental health and mental health, and so on and so forth in terms of human rights. And I think that, part of the conversations that we're having, I hope you're drawing the lines. These are not separate panels that we're hosting. It's a continuing conversation from this morning with the three panelists who said that at the heart of democracy are questions. And I hope as you're sitting here, you're asking yourself, if my library is posing a question or trying to answer a question, what is that question? And as we heard is, do we have access? Who are the people? And how do we feel at home? And not just in the library, but in our broader environments and ultimately in the world. So after this break that we're going on now, we're going to have another panel where we're discussing about how libraries thrive.
And then I think we really are going to be at the top of that summit, because indeed we're going to get all that information from the first two panels, bring it all together, and then see how these different libraries indeed thrive, but also sometimes are really on the brink of collapse or surviving at the moment. So we're going to look at what are the lessons that we can learn to make sure that that whole network of 65,000 libraries in Europe can be thriving together.
And starting from now, you're going to go back to the 6th floor. If you need quiet time, if you need a VR experience, if you want to check out the marketplace, this time we have librarians from Eastern, Southern, and Northern Europe who will be telling you about their ideas that they're working on, addressing some of what you all discussed just now. So lastly, before you go, I need a reminder. Are there libraries in the future? Yeah.